My name is Betty, and I'm 68 years old. Tonight I stand shivering outside my daughter Amanda's mansion, clutching a handmade Christmas gift, watching the party through frosted windows. When she opens the door, her smile fades. Mum, what are you doing here? Sorry, this is a private event, she says as I glimpse my other children inside. How did I end up here living in a tiny room above my friend's garage after selling my home to help my children start their businesses? Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. To understand why I'm standing frozen at my daughter's doorstep on Christmas Eve, we need to go back. 12 years ago, my husband Frank passed away from a sudden heart attack. After 43 years of marriage, I found myself alone in our four-bedroom colonial in the suburbs of Seattle. It was a beautiful home, with a garden that Frank and I had lovingly tended for decades. The mortgage was fully paid off, providing me with financial security, despite my modest teacher's pension. Frank and I raised three wonderful children in that home. Amanda, my eldest, at 42, always showed remarkable determination. Even as a little girl, she organized neighborhood lemonade stands and babysitting services. Thomas, now 39, inherited his father's analytical mind and passion for technology. Jessica, my baby at 35, had her father's creativity and my nurturing spirit. Our home was filled with laughter and traditions. Sunday dinners were sacred, with everyone gathering around our oak dining table to share stories from their week. Christmas mornings meant cinnamon rolls baking while the children opened presents under the tree Frank and I had decorated together. The backyard hosted countless birthday parties, graduation celebrations, and summer barbecues. A house is made of walls and beams. A home is built with love and dreams. Read a wooden sign Frank had carved that hung in our entryway. We truly believed that. When Frank passed, the children were already grown with lives of their own. Amanda had married Greg, an accountant, and they had two children, Lily and Mason. Thomas had married Natalie, and they were expecting their first child. Jessica was engaged to Ryan, planning their wedding for the following spring. After the funeral, they all offered to have me live with them, but I declined. "This is my home," I told them. "All my memories with your father are here." They understood and supported my decision to stay. I established a peaceful routine in the years that followed. Mornings in my garden, afternoons, volunteering at the local library or community center. I joined a book club and a walking group, making new friends while maintaining my independence. My pension covered my modest needs, and the paid-off house meant minimal expenses. Frank and I had raised our children to value hard work, gratitude, and family bonds above all else. We weren't wealthy, but we provided them with college educations and emotional support as they built their adult lives. I was proud watching them create their own paths, though I missed the days when they would run through the house calling for Mum and Dad. The children visited when they could, though less frequently as their lives grew busier. Amanda's corporate job consumed much of her time. Thomas had moved to Portland for work, but called weekly. Jessica lived closest and stopped by most Sundays for coffee and conversation. I never expected any financial support from my children. They had their own responsibilities, mortgages, and children to raise. I was content knowing they were building good lives based on the values Frank and I had instilled. Everything changed on a crisp autumn afternoon when Amanda called, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mum, I need to talk to you about something important, something amazing. Can we all come over this weekend?" "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, curious about what had her so animated. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," she assured me. "We just need to discuss a family opportunity. You're going to love it." I spent the days before their visit baking Amanda's favorite lemon bars and Thomas's preferred chocolate chip cookies, curious about this mysterious family opportunity. Little did I know that conversation would completely transform my life, setting in motion events I never could have anticipated. That Saturday, as I watched all three of my children arrive simultaneously, their faces alight with excitement, I felt a surge of maternal pride. They looked so grown up, so accomplished. I had no idea they were about to present me with a propositions that would ultimately cost me everything. The afternoon sun streamed through my kitchen windows as Amanda, Thomas, and Jessica settled around the dining table. I served coffee and homemade cookies while they exchanged knowing glances, barely containing their excitement. "So what's this big family opportunity?" I asked, taking my seat at the head of the table where I'd sat for countless family meals over the decades. Amanda, always the leader, spoke first. "Mum, we've all been talking and we have amazing news. Each of us has been developing business plans and we're ready to take the next step." She described her vision of an upscale spa chain called Serenity, targeting professional women. "The market research shows incredible potential," she explained. "I've already found the perfect location in downtown Seattle, but I need capital for renovations and equipment." Thomas leaned forward eagerly. "And I've developed an app that's going to revolutionize how people organize their digital photos and memories. I've got interest from angel investors, but I need seed money to build a prototype and hire initial staff." Jessica, not to be outdone, detailed her plans for a boutique clothing store in the trendy Capitol Hill district. "I've already made connections with several exclusive designers. This could be the start of something huge." I smiled supportively, though I was confused about why they were sharing these plans with me. "That all sounds wonderful. I'm proud of your entrepreneurial spirit." "That's where you come in, Mum," Amanda said, reaching for my hand. "We've been looking at the numbers, and we realized there's a perfect solution right under our noses." Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "Your house, Mum. It's fully paid off and in a neighborhood that's skyrocketed in value." My heart skipped a beat as I began to understand. "My house." "If you sold it," Jessica explained gently, "there would be enough money to fund all three of our business ventures. It's just sitting there, all that equity, doing nothing." "But this is my home," I replied, looking around at the walls that held decades of memories. "We know it's a lot to ask," Amanda acknowledged. "But think of it as an investment in our future, in the family's future." Thomas pulled out a spreadsheet. "Based on comparable sales, your house could fetch around $700,000, split three ways that gives each of us the startup capital we need." "And where would I live?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They had clearly anticipated this question. "You could rotate staying with each of us," Amanda suggested. 3 months with me, 3 with Thomas, 3 with Jessica. You'd never have to worry about housing costs again. And once our businesses take off, we'd take care of you financially," Thomas added. "You'd never have to worry about money again." Jessica squeezed my hand. "Think about it, Mum. Instead of this big house with all the maintenance and yard work, you'd be with your family. You could spend more time with your grandchildren." "We'd be giving you the gift of freedom," Amanda concluded. "Freedom from home ownership responsibilities, from isolation, from financial worries." I sat quietly absorbing their proposal. The house had felt emptier since Frank's passing, and the maintenance was becoming more challenging as I aged. Still, it was my home filled with irreplaceable memories. "What about my things?" I asked. "My furniture?" "Frank's workshop tools, all our mementos." "You could keep whatever is most important to you," Jessica assured me. "We could store some things, and honestly, Mom, do you really need all this stuff?" Over the next 2 hours, they presented a unified front of enthusiasm and assurance. They showed me projections of business success, promises of financial security, and visions of a close-knit family future. "Just imagine, Mum," Thomas said. "In a few years, when all our businesses are thriving, we could even buy you a new place if you wanted." I requested time to consider their proposal. After they left, I walked through each room of my home, touching door frames Frank had installed, looking out windows that had framed decades of seasonal changes. Could I really leave all this behind? For 3 days, I contemplated their request. I called my oldest friend Martha for advice. Betty, it sounds risky, she warned. What guarantees do you have that their businesses will succeed? They're my children, I replied. If I can't trust them, who can I trust? In the end, my decision came down to one simple truth. I loved my children and wanted them to succeed. If my home could provide the foundation for their dreams, wasn't that what Frank and I had worked for all those years? I called Amanda and told her I was ready to move forward. The children arrived that weekend with a simple one-page agreement for me to sign. It stated that I would sell the house and divide the proceeds equally among the 3 children for their business ventures. In return, they would provide me with housing and financial support. Do we need a lawyer to look at this? I asked. Mum, we're family, Amanda replied, looking slightly hurt. This is just to have something in writing, but of course we'll take care of you. I signed the paper, trusting the children I had raised to honor their promises. Within weeks, my house was on the market. It sold quickly for $725,000, even more than Thomas had estimated. As I packed up 40 years of memories, sorting what to keep and what to let go, I consoled myself with the thought that I was investing in my family's future. The furniture I couldn't take was sold or donated. Family photos were carefully packed into boxes. Frank's tools went to Thomas, who promised to treasure them. On my last day in the house, I stood in the empty living room where we had celebrated countless Christmases and birthdays. Goodbye, Frank, I whispered to the empty space. I hope I'm doing the right thing. The next morning, I handed over the keys to a young couple with 2 small children. They looked so much like Frank and I had when we first bought the place. As I drove away with my car packed with personal belongings, I told myself this was just the beginning of a new chapter. I had no idea how painfully that chapter would unfold. I moved into Amanda's downtown penthouse first. Her family lived in a sleek, modern 3-bedroom condominium with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. My grandchildren, Lily and Mason, were initially delighted to have Grandma living with them. I took over the guest room, which had its own bathroom but limited storage for my belongings. The first few weeks were pleasant. I cooked family meals, helped the children with homework, and tried to make myself useful without being intrusive. Amanda and Greg seemed appreciative, especially when I volunteered to watch the children after school, saving them the cost of after-school care. This is working out wonderfully, Amanda declared at dinner one evening. The kids love having you here. I felt useful and needed exactly what I had hoped for in this new arrangement. Amanda used my portion of the house money to secure a premium location for her spa and begin renovations. She would come home excited about selecting fixtures and hiring staff, and I genuinely shared her enthusiasm. Around the 6-week mark, subtle changes began. Greg started making comments about the kitchen being too crowded when I was preparing dinner. Amanda mentioned that my morning routine of making coffee at 6 a.m. was disturbing their sleep, despite their bedroom being on the opposite side of the apartment. Mum, could you maybe wait until 7 to start breakfast? She asked. The kitchen noise carries more than you'd think. I adjusted my routines, trying to be less obtrusive. I started watching television with headphones and limited my cooking to times when they weren't home. Still, the comments continued. The guest bathroom always smells like your perfume, Amanda remarked one day. Mason says it makes him sneeze. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. I would enter rooms to find conversations suddenly halted, suggesting I had been the topic. Amanda began having business dinners that excluded me, leaving me to eat alone in my room. After 3 months, Amanda approached me with a concerned expression. Mum, we've been thinking. Thomas and Natalie have so much more space in their new house. Wouldn't you be more comfortable there? I recognized the gentle eviction for what it was, but nodded agreeably. Of course, that was always the plan to rotate. I'll call Thomas today. Thomas and Natalie had used his portion of the money to make a down payment on a large house in an upscale neighborhood. They welcomed me initially, setting me up in their finished basement, which had been converted into a comfortable guest suite. "You'll have more privacy here, Mum," Thomas assured me. "Your own entrance and everything." The basement was lovely but isolated. I could hear the family moving about upstairs, but felt separated from their daily life. When I tried to join them for meals or family activities, there was always a reason why it wasn't convenient. "We're just having a quick dinner tonight, Mum," Natalie would say. "We didn't think you'd want to join since it's just leftovers." Or Thomas would explain, "We're meeting some colleagues with their kids. It's really more of a work thing than family time." I began to notice that my grandchildren were being taught to view my presence as temporary. "Grandma is visiting for a while," Natalie would tell her friends, despite our agreement that this was now my home too. After another 3 months, Thomas suggested it was time for me to stay with Jessica. "She's been asking when it's her turn to have you," he claimed, though Jessica had never mentioned this during our weekly phone calls. Jessica and Ryan lived in a spacious apartment in a trendy neighborhood. Their guest room was the smallest, yet barely fitting a single bed and dresser, but I was determined to make it work. Jessica was opening her boutique and seemed genuinely happy to have my help organizing inventory and setting up displays. Yet the pattern repeated. Initial warmth faded into subtle suggestions that I was intruding on their space and lifestyle. Jessica's friends would visit, and I would be introduced as my mum who's staying with us for a bit, rather than as a permanent household member. It was during my stay with Jessica that I made a disturbing discovery. While helping her organize some paperwork, I came across the deed to her new store. It listed Jessica as the sole owner with no mention of our investment agreement. Further investigation revealed that both Amanda's spa and Thomas's startup were similarly registered under their names alone, with no legal acknowledgement of my contribution. When I gently raised this with Jessica, she became defensive. "Mum, we never said you'd be a business partner. The money was a gift to help us get started. But the agreement was that you'd provide for me financially in return," I reminded her. "And we are," she insisted. "You're living with us, aren't you? We're not charging you rent." The conversation left me uneasy. A week later, I received a call from Amanda. "Mum, we've been talking." She began using the royal "we" that I had come to recognize meant the 3 children had been discussing me. "We think it might be best if you found your own place." "My own place," I echoed. "With what money I gave you everything from the house sale." "You still have your pension," she pointed out. "And we could help a little with rent for somewhere small. It's just that we all need our space, privacy is important." I felt the floor drop out from beneath me. "But our agreement, that was never meant to be permanent, Mom. We thought you understood that." Within days, all 3 children were united in suggesting I find independent living. They presented it as being for my benefit, allowing me freedom and autonomy, the same words they had used to convince me to sell my house in the first place. With few options, I called my old friend Martha, who had warned me against the arrangement from the beginning. To her credit, she didn't say, "I told you so." "My garage apartment is empty," she offered immediately. "It's not much, just a room with a bathroom and kitchenette, but you're welcome to it for as long as you need." And so, 8 months after selling my house, I moved into a converted space above Martha's garage. My belongings, once filling a 4-bedroom home, were now reduced to what could fit in a 300-square-foot room. I paid Martha a small rent from my pension and took a part-time job at the local library to make ends meet. My children expressed relief at my independence, but made little effort to visit my new home. Our weekly family dinners ceased entirely. Invitations to their homes became rare and were always for specific events rather than casual visits. I had gone from homeowner and matriarch to what felt like a distant acquaintance in less than a year. As I arranged my few remaining photos on the dresser in my new room, I wondered how things had gone so wrong. The children I had raised to value family above all had somehow decided I was no longer an essential part of theirs. The Seattle winter was particularly harsh that year, matching the cold reality of my new circumstances. From my small window above Martha's garage, I watched the transformation of the neighborhood as holiday decorations appeared. My own festive touches were limited to a small artificial tree and a string of lights around my window. While I adjusted to my diminished circumstances, my children's businesses flourished. Amanda's Serenity Spa opened its second location just 10 months after launching. The local business journal featured her in their 40 Under 40 spotlight, praising her self-made success, with no mention of where her startup capital had originated. Thomas's photo organization app gained traction among tech-savvy parents, attracting a significant investment from a venture capital firm. His social media posts showed a gleaming new office space with a growing team of young programmers. He purchased a vacation cabin on Lake Chelan and a new Tesla, sharing photos of both online. Jessica's boutique became a favorite among Seattle's affluent shoppers, earning mentions in style blogs and local magazines. Within the first year, she opened a second location in Bellevue. Her Instagram showcased her expanding inventory and the renovation of her and Ryan's apartment with high-end furnishings. Meanwhile, I stretched my pension to cover basics, supplemented by my 20 hours per week shelving books at the library. My Social Security benefits wouldn't begin for another 4 years. The part-time job provided much-needed social interaction and a small additional income, but it wasn't enough to afford independent housing in Seattle's expensive market. In those first months, after moving to Martha's garage apartment, I called my children regularly. Usually I reached voicemail. Return calls came days later and were brief, filled with excuses about busy schedules. "Things are crazy at the spa, Mum. Can I call you next week?" "We're in the middle of a major app update, Mum. I'll try to stop by soon." "The holiday shopping season is our busiest time, Mum. Maybe we can catch up after New Year's." Promises to visit or have me over for dinner were made and broken with increasing frequency. I began marking these cancelled plans on my calendar, a growing record of disappointment. My 70th birthday arrived with no celebration. Amanda sent a text message. Thomas called briefly between meetings. Jessica mailed a generic card that arrived 3 days late. None of them visited or invited me to dinner. That same week, scrolling through social media, I saw photos of Amanda hosting a lavish dinner party in her newly remodeled dining room. Thomas and Jessica were both there with their spouses, smiling around a table laden with food. The caption read, "Nothing better than family time, so blessed to have everyone together." Everyone except me. Martha noticed my withdrawal and increased sadness. "Betty, you can't keep hoping they'll suddenly remember how to be decent human beings," she said one evening as we shared tea. "They've shown you who they are now." "They're still my children," I insisted. "Maybe they're just caught up in their success." "Success that wouldn't have happened without you," Martha reminded me. "They've forgotten that part too quickly." I maintained a monthly lunch with my grandchildren, picking them up from school occasionally when their parents were busy. These moments became my most treasured times, though even they were beginning to reflect their parents' attitudes. Lily Amanda's 12-year-old asked me once why I lived in that tiny room instead of a proper house like other grandmas. How could I explain to a child that her mother had taken my proper house? The ultimate confirmation of my new status came at Thanksgiving. For decades, Thanksgiving dinner had been held at my house, with everyone contributing dishes to the feast. This year, I assumed we would gather at Amanda's, as she had the largest home now. No invitation came. When I called to ask about plans, Amanda sounded surprised. "Oh, we're having a small dinner this year, just immediate family." "I am immediate family," I said, my voice catching. "I'm your mother." "Of course, Mum, I didn't mean. It's just that we're having some of Greg's colleagues too, and the dining room only seats so many tita." Later that day, I saw Amanda's social media post, "Prepping for our biggest Thanksgiving yet, 20 guests and counting." I spent Thanksgiving with Martha and some of her friends' other strays, without family gatherings to attend. They were kind and welcoming, but as I helped serve pumpkin pie, I couldn't help wondering how I had become a stray when I had 3 children and 5 grandchildren of my own. That evening, my phone filled with photos from Amanda's celebration. Thomas and Jessica were there with their families, along with friends and colleagues I didn't recognize. The table was beautifully set with china that had once been mine, given to Amanda when I downsized to the garage apartment. In every photo, they looked happy and complete. No empty chair marked my absence. No mention was made of missing me. Looking at those images, I finally accepted a painful truth in the story they were now telling about their lives I had been written out. December arrived with twinkling lights and holiday music filling every store. For the first time in my life, I dreaded Christmas. In previous years, my home had been the gathering place for Christmas Eve dinner and Christmas morning breakfast. Now I had no home to offer, and apparently no invitation to receive. Still, I was determined to maintain some semblance of tradition. With my limited budget, I couldn't afford store-bought gifts, so I spent evenings creating handmade presents. For Amanda's family, I knitted scarves in each person's favorite color. For Thomas and his wife, I assembled a photo album of family memories. For Jessica and Ryan, I baked tins of Christmas cookies from recipes handed down through generations. 2 weeks before Christmas, I called each child to ask about holiday plans. All 3 conversations followed the same pattern. Vague responses, no definite plans, promises to figure something out soon. As Christmas approached, my calls went unanswered. I left cheerful voicemails about wanting to coordinate gift exchanges. No one called back. 3 days before Christmas, I saw Amanda's social media post, "Annual Christmas Eve gala preparations underway. Can't wait to host 30 of our favorite people tomorrow night." I wasn't among the 30 favorite people. No invitation had been extended to me. On Christmas Eve morning, I made a decision. Perhaps they had simply forgotten to invite me. Maybe Amanda assumed Jessica had included me in her plans, or Thomas thought I would naturally be included without a formal invitation. We were family, after all. Surely I would be welcome at my own daughter's Christmas celebration. I wrapped my handmade gifts carefully using newspaper I had painted with festive patterns to save on wrapping paper. I dressed in my nicest outfit, a red sweater I had owned for years, and black slacks. Martha offered to drive me, but I declined. "I'll take the bus," I said. "It stops just a block from Amanda's house." "Are you sure about this, Betty?" Martha asked, concern evident in her expression. "Have they actually invited you?" "They're my children," I replied as if that answered the question. In my mind it did. The bus ride took 45 minutes, including a transfer downtown. I clutched my packages, watching as Seattle's neighborhoods grew progressively more affluent. When I disembarked, light snow was falling, dusting the manicured lawns of Amanda's upscale neighborhood. I walked the final block slowly, my arthritis protesting in the cold. Amanda's house was impossible to miss. The 3-story Tudor-style home was outlined in white lights, with professionally decorated fir trees flanking the front entrance. Luxury cars filled the circular driveway and lined the street. Through the large front windows, I could see a crowd of well-dressed people mingling champagne glasses in hand. For a moment, I hesitated on the sidewalk. This elegant gathering bore no resemblance to our family's traditional Christmas Eve celebrations of homemade food and board games. Would I be embarrassingly underdressed? Would my handmade gifts seem pitiful compared to what other guests had brought? But I gathered my courage. These were my children inside, my grandchildren, my family. I made my way up the shoveled walkway and climbed the front steps, carefully balancing my packages. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. After a long moment, the door swung open. Amanda stood framed in the entrance, stunning in a green cocktail dress, her hair professionally styled. Her smile of greeting froze when she recognized me. "Mom?" Her voice held no welcome, only confusion tinged with annoyance. "What are you doing here?" The question struck me like a physical blow. What was I doing here? I was coming to Christmas Eve with my family, as I had every year of my adult life. "I came for Christmas Eve," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I brought gifts for everyone." Amanda glanced over her shoulder nervously, then stepped onto the porch, partially closing the door behind her. "Mum, you should have called first. We're having an event. I saw on Facebook your Christmas Eve party. I thought—" My voice trailed off as I realized my mistake. "This is a business networking event," she explained, though I could see families with children through the window. "Clients, investors, colleagues. It's not really a family thing." I stood there, arms full of carefully wrapped packages, as snow began to accumulate on my shoulders and uncovered head. "But Thomas and Jessica are here," I said, having glimpsed them through the window. "I saw them in the living room." Amanda sighed, impatience creeping into her expression. "Yes, because Thomas is talking to potential investors for his next funding round, and Jessica is displaying some of her boutique items for the guests." "Mum, I'm sorry, but this is a private event." Private. The word echoed in my mind. Private as in I was not included, not invited, not welcome. "I see," I managed to say, my voice barely audible. "I misunderstood." I held out the packages. "These are for the children, and for you and Greg. And I have ones for Thomas and Jessica too." Amanda looked at the newspaper-wrapped gifts with something like pity. "Maybe drop them off another time, we're really in the middle of things here." She didn't take the packages. She didn't invite me in from the snow, not even for a moment. Behind her I could hear laughter and Christmas music, the sounds of joy I had been excluded from. "Of course," I said, lowering my arms, still clutching the rejected gifts. "Another time." "I'll call you tomorrow," Amanda promised, already stepping back inside. "Merry Christmas, Mum." The door closed firmly, leaving me alone on the porch, snow now falling more heavily around me. Through the window, I watched Amanda rejoin the party, saying something to a nearby guest that made them both laugh. No one looked toward the door again. I stood there for a long moment, unable to move, the full weight of reality finally settling on me. My children had not forgotten to invite me. They had chosen not to include me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an oversight. This was a deliberate exclusion. Slowly, I turned and made my way down the steps, careful not to slip on the gathering snow. The packages felt impossibly heavy now. I walked back to the bus stop, sat on the cold bench, and waited, tears freezing on my cheeks before they could fall. The last bus had already passed. I sat there anyway, unsure where else to go, unwilling to call Martha and admit how completely I had humiliated myself. How thoroughly I had been rejected by my own children. "Betty, my God, what are you doing sitting out here in this weather?" I looked up to see Martha's car pulled alongside the curb, her worried face peering through the passenger window. She must have followed me, suspecting exactly what had happened. "They didn't want me there," I said simply as she helped me into the warm car. "It was a private event." Martha took one look at my face, and the packages still clutched in my arms, and her expression hardened. "Those ungrateful, selfish—" She caught herself and squeezed my hand instead of finishing. "Let's get you home. You're freezing." Home. A tiny room above a garage. That was all the home I had left. As we drove away, I looked back at Amanda's glowing house one last time. Through the windows, I could see my 3 children gathered by the fireplace, drinks in hand, laughing together. The perfect family portrait -1. The days following Christmas passed in a fog of grief. I barely left my small room, unable to face the world or process the depth of my children's rejection. Martha brought meals that I hardly touched and sat with me in patient silence when I couldn't find words to express my pain. "I gave them everything," I whispered one evening, staring out at the winter rain. "My home, my savings, my trust. How could they do this?" Martha, who had lost her own husband years earlier, but was blessed with devoted children, shook her head sadly. "I don't know, Betty. I've never understood how some children can take and take without giving back, but you can't keep living in this limbo." She was right. The Christmas Eve rejection had broken something fundamental in me, but I couldn't remain in this shattered state. I had to find a way forward, even if it meant accepting that the loving family I thought I had raised no longer existed. On New Year's Day, Martha invited me to join her for coffee with a friend who volunteered at the senior center. Margaret Ryan was a retired attorney who specialized in elder law. As we sipped coffee in Martha's cozy kitchen, I found myself sharing the entire story. Margaret listened intently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Did you have any written agreement about your financial support after selling the house?" she asked. I described the simple document my children had prepared. "It wasn't very detailed," I admitted. "Just that I would sell the house, they would use the money for their businesses, and they would provide housing and financial support." "Do you still have a copy?" Margaret asked. I didn't. The document had disappeared during one of my moves between children's homes. Amanda had kept the original, saying she would file it for safekeeping. Margaret sighed. Without documentation and with the money already gone, legal recourse would be challenging and expensive. And frankly, even if you could force them to honor the agreement financially, would you want to live with children who clearly don't want you there? She was right. No court order could restore the loving family relationships I had believed in. No legal victory would heal the wound of being treated like an unwelcome stranger by my own children. "What can I do?" I asked. "First, accept that your financial situation has fundamentally changed," Margaret advised. "Then we build from there. The senior center has resources for people in your situation." Over the next weeks, with Margaret's guidance, I explored programs for low-income seniors. I qualified for subsidized housing, though the waiting list was over 2 years long. I applied for additional assistance programs to supplement my pension. I increased my library hours to 30 per week, the maximum allowed for part-time work. Throughout January, none of my children called. The promised Christmas Day phone call from Amanda never came. The gifts I had made remained wrapped in a corner of my room. Painful reminders of my misplaced hope. In February, I attended a support group for seniors facing financial insecurity. To my surprise, many participants shared similar stories of children who had taken advantage of their generosity. "My son convinced me to co-sign for his business loan," said Eleanor, a 75-year-old former nurse. "When the business failed, I lost my retirement savings covering the debt. My daughter moved in temporarily after her divorce," shared Richard, a retired postal worker. 5 years later, she's still there, pays no rent, and treats me like an unwelcome roommate in my own home. Their stories helped me realize I wasn't alone in my experience. More importantly, these resilient individuals were finding ways to rebuild their lives despite their losses. They had discovered new purpose, formed supportive friendships, and refused to be defined by their children's betrayal. Inspired by the group, I started a blog called Starting Over at 70. I wrote honestly about selling my home, my children's broken promises, and my struggle to create a new life. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments poured in from seniors in similar situations, along with messages of support from younger readers, horrified by my children's behavior. A small local publisher contacted me after reading the blog, suggesting I expand my story into a book. The advance was modest, but provided a financial cushion I desperately needed. More importantly, the project gave me purpose and a platform to advocate for vulnerable seniors. By spring, I had developed a new routine and support system. My friendship with Martha deepened, and we began discussing a more permanent arrangement where I would contribute to household expenses in exchange for converting the garage apartment into a proper small living space. In March, I finally found the courage to email all three of my children. I didn't accuse or condemn them. Instead, I simply expressed my feelings. I want you to know that I love you and always will. I'm disappointed and hurt by how our arrangement turned out, especially after I sacrificed my home to support your dreams. I don't regret helping you succeed, but I wish you had honored your promises to care for me in return. I'm building a new life now and finding my way forward. My door is always open if you wish to rebuild our relationship on more honest terms. A week passed with no response. Then Jessica replied, "Mum, I'm sorry things didn't work out as planned. We never intended for you to end up in your current situation. It was just so difficult having you live with us. You have certain expectations and ways of doing things that didn't mesh with our lifestyles. I hope you understand it wasn't personal. I'll try to visit soon." Her response lacked any acknowledgement of their broken promises or the financial harm they had caused. She framed the situation as an incompatibility issue rather than a betrayal of trust. Still, it was the only response I received. Amanda and Thomas maintained their silence. I realized then that I couldn't wait for my children's approval or acknowledgement to move forward. Their version of events would always cast them as reasonable actors and me as somehow responsible for my own misfortune. Accepting this was painful, but necessary for my healing. As spring blossomed into summer, my life began taking new shape. The book I was writing gave structure to my days and purpose to my reflections. My blog community grew, creating connections with people facing similar challenges across the country. I began speaking at senior centers about financial protection and rebuilding life after loss. Martha and I developed a deeper friendship that evolved into a solution for both of us. Her large house felt increasingly empty as she aged while she worried about maintaining it alone. Meanwhile, my garage apartment remained cramped and inadequate for long-term living. "I've been thinking," she said one evening as we shared dinner. "What if we make this arrangement permanent? You could move into the spare bedroom downstairs. We'd share the kitchen and living areas. You'd have proper space, and I'd have company and help with the house." Her suggestion made perfect sense. We were compatible housemates with similar routines and interests. By pooling resources, we could both live more comfortably than either could alone. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I don't want you to feel obligated because of my situation." Martha laughed. "Betty at our age chosen family is sometimes better than blood. I enjoy having you here. It's a win for both of us." We reorganized the house to create private space for each of us while sharing common areas. My rent contribution was affordable on my combined income from the library book advance and pension. For the first time since selling my home, I felt settled and secure. As my personal situation stabilized, I channeled my experience into community service. With several friends from the senior support group, I started weekly gatherings for elderly people living alone. What began as coffee meetups evolved into skill-sharing sessions, group outings, and a volunteer network where seniors helped each other with transportation, home repairs, and companionship. In September, 8 months after the Christmas Eve rejection, I received a letter from Thomas. Unlike Jessica's quick email, his was thoughtful and showed genuine remorse. Mum, I've been reflecting a lot on what happened with the house and our promises to you. I was caught up in my ambition and the excitement of the startup. I convinced myself that the arrangement was temporary, that once the business took off, we'd make things right. But success came, and I still didn't step up. There's no excuse for how we treated you, especially at Christmas. I'm deeply ashamed. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize how wrong I was. If you're willing, I'd like to start rebuilding our relationship. His letter touched me deeply. While it couldn't undo the harm or restore what I had lost, his acknowledgement of wrongdoing opened a door to potential healing. I called Thomas, and we had our first honest conversation in over a year. I don't know if things can ever be the same, I told him, but I'm willing to try building something new. We began with monthly lunch meetings, awkward at first, but gradually more comfortable. Thomas brought his children and made genuine efforts to include me in their lives again. He offered financial help, which I initially declined, wanting our reconciliation to be based on emotional repair rather than monetary compensation. Jessica, seeing Thomas's efforts, also began reaching out more consistently. Her approach was less direct about past wrongs, but she made practical efforts to include me, inviting me to Sunday dinners and bringing the children for regular visits. Amanda remained distant. When we occasionally encountered each other at events with Thomas or Jessica, she was polite but reserved. She never acknowledged any wrongdoing or responsibility for my situation, preferring to act as if nothing unusual had happened. Her Christmas Eve rejection remained unmentioned and unapologized for. By the following Christmas, my life had transformed in ways I never expected. My book, Starting Over a Mother's Journey from Betrayal to Rebuilding, was published to positive reviews and strong sales. The royalties, combined with my other income sources, provided financial stability I hadn't thought possible a year earlier. Martha and I hosted a Christmas Eve gathering for our chosen family, friends from the senior centre, neighbours without family nearby, and my reconnected children, Thomas and Jessica, with their families. Our house was filled with laughter music and the genuine warmth that comes from relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Amanda declined our invitation, sending a gift basket instead. I accepted her choice with a peace I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. I had learned that family connections weren't guaranteed by blood alone, but had to be nurtured through reciprocal care and respect. As I looked around our Christmas gathering, I realized that the loss of my house had ultimately led to finding a different kind of home, one built on chosen connections rather than physical structure. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead forced me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed. That night, after our guests had departed and Martha had gone to bed, I sat by our small Christmas tree, reflecting on the journey of the past 2 years. I no longer defined myself primarily as a betrayed mother, but as a resilient woman who had created a meaningful life from the ashes of broken trust. I thought of the frightened, shivering woman who had stood rejected on Amanda's porch the previous Christmas, and wished I could tell her that the pain would eventually lead to healing, that the loss would create space for new blessings, that the end of one chapter would allow the beginning of another, even more authentic one. The house I had sold was just a structure. The family relationships I had lost were painful, but had been replaced by connections based on mutual respect, rather than obligation or habit. The financial security I had sacrificed had taught me resilience and self-reliance I might never have discovered otherwise. The journey wasn't what I would have chosen, but the destination had its own unexpected beauty. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led to positive changes in your life? Or have you had to create a chosen family when blood relatives disappointed you? Share your story in the comments below. And if my journey has touched or inspired you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear that it's never too late to start over. Thank you for being part of my new chapter, and may your own holiday season be filled with authentic connections and genuine love.